I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two.
You can't tell women to lower their expectations, but this is the reality. When you ask a man if you could have a woman who had 80% of everything you wanted, 75% say, yeah, I'm on board. When you say to a woman, a man has 80% of what you want, 75% say that's not enough.
Hi, guys. Welcome to my channel. I know there's a lot of great content out there, and I always feel honored when you stop and watch one of my videos. So, thank you so much. Today, we're going to dive once again into the male loneliness epidemic. And I have to start this video with just a little bit of my personal thoughts. I do believe that there is a male loneliness epidemic. I don't think that it's fake. I don't think that people are just whining about something that doesn't exist. But I think that there is a human loneliness epidemic that is impacting both men and women, and we're coping with it in different ways. And in some ways, the genders do have different resources in one another. No, I am not just a bitter man hating woman. I actually have a lot of men in my life, and I treasure every single one of them. Of course, there's my Kev, my partner. He is the sun in my universe, and honestly, one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I love him with every cell in my body. I am also the mom to two beautiful sons who also light up my world in their own unique and amazing ways. I'm stepmom to one beautiful college son, and I'm grandma to a 3-year-old whose face I wish that I could show on camera. We're going to protect his privacy, and it kills me because he's so cute. So just imagine the most beautiful little platinum haired cherub that you could ever possibly see. And believe it or not, a lot of my friends are men. So men hold a special place in my heart. I am not in any way man hating. I do, however, hate how the conversation around the male loneliness epidemic focuses primarily on women as the fix for the epidemic. I really appreciated a comment that I got on one of my videos yesterday from Bourbon Bougie, who I love. She's one of my favorite people on YouTube. I always learn so much from her. I appreciate her wisdom on so many topics regarding women's rights, women empowerment, women's health, women's relationships. She said that she wishes that this male loneliness epidemic would turn into a pandemic so that the men would start to wake up, listen, and make some very necessary changes. Agreed, 1,000,000%. Another thing that really bothers me about discussions around the male loneliness epidemic is that I don't think that the conversation is really about loneliness at all. I do think it's about sex. Men have had access to sex, they have numbed out with sex, they have enjoyed having all the sex that they could possibly get. And women are no longer willing to engage in that, especially with the recension of Roe versus Wade and the very scary possibility of having forced births and becoming single moms. I see the young women in my life being more sexually responsible than my generation ever was. So I do think that that word loneliness is being substituted for sex in a lot of the dialogues that I'm having in real life and a lot of the things that I'm seeing online, both in media and social media and magazines and the themes of TV shows, etc. I do realize that men are suffering. And again, a lot of us are. And I don't want to downplay or dismiss anybody's feelings. If you feel like you're alone and isolated, I hope that you'll look at why that is, what those feelings are saying to you, and start to make some necessary changes. And I hope that this video opens up the eyes of both men and women to some solutions to this male loneliness epidemic. First, I want to show you just another little snippet from this man on this topic.
I read that on Tinder, a man of average attractiveness has to swipe right 200 times to get one coffee. And then 4 of those 5 coffees will ghost him. They will decide they don't want to meet him or they won't show up. That means a guy of average attractiveness has to swipe right 1,000 times to get one coffee. Now, what does that tell that guy? Women don't value me. Women make me feel rejected. And then they go online and they see these misogynists telling them it's not your fault. And these men become much more prone to misogynistic content, much more prone to nationalistic content, blaming other people for the lack of economic opportunity. they start sequestering from society, I worry that we are literally evolving a new species of asexual, asocial male.
I had the really interesting, amazing, wild experience of dating in my 40s when my husband of 24 years abandoned me in 2018. I had never, ever anticipated that I would be dating ever again. We got married in the Mormon temple and we said for time and all eternity, and I meant it. I didn't realize that he didn't mean it. I'm glad he didn't because my life is better than it ever was. But here I was as a 40-year-old woman out there in a dating world that was very different than the last time I had dated in 1992. I did what everybody does. I downloaded all the apps on my phone and started swiping. Now, I don't know how to say this without sounding snobbing. Don't come after me, okay? But I had no problem finding people who wanted to date me. Zero. I don't know. I was pretty 6 years ago. Like, that was kind of my thing. It was like, the revenge dress? Well, this was my revenge era. I was at the gym twice a day, platinum hair down to my butt. Anyway, okay. I hope that that doesn't come across as snobby, but I had so many conversations with some of the guys that I was dating that they were having the opposite experience. Relatively attractive men who had a lot of things going for them, who said that, like, I was the first person that they had matched with or that had swiped on them or bumbled them or whatever for a really long time. And we had conversations about how frustrating it was to be a man in this dating climate when it's hard to get attention. A lot of the men that I was going on dates with were expressing the same frustration that this man in the video expressed, that it was hard for them and easy for me. And some of them actually said that they wish that they could be me. Like, I wish that I was a woman out there doing this because you guys have it easy. And they chalked it up to the hair and the smile and the boobs and the blue eyes. But I think that it's a little bit more complex than that. As I was dating, I started to see that men fell into one of two categories. Either they could potentially add value to my life, or they would just be one giant liability. And sometimes you would see that on the very first date. I would sit down with men who, right off the bat, would start telling me what they were looking for. I'm looking for somebody who wants to go skiing with me. I'm looking for somebody who enjoys like Friday night date night, somebody who loves to cook, somebody who loves kids. And I could see from the very first conversation that this man was like ordering his dream wife from the catalog. And I was no longer willing to be a wife appliance. I had already done that for 24 years. And these men were nothing but a liability. And some of these guys, it's like, I was just seeing like all the extra tasks that I was going to have to perform that I didn't have to perform in my current single life, things that were going to take away my time, sap my resources, sap my energy. And it just completely turned me off. Found that a lot of these men, too, as they were telling me all of the things that they wanted in a woman, would then kind of balance that out with their assets. Like, they tell me about their job, they tell me about retirement, about timeshares, vacation properties, and all of the money that they were going to throw at me as though that was the only thing that a woman could possibly want. On the other end of the spectrum were the men that were actually interesting and intriguing to me. Those that, rather than seeming like a liability and just energy vampires, seemed like they would improve my life, like they would add benefit. Let me give you a couple examples of this. Dating as a single mom is problematic to begin with because I was working so many jobs. I would, in the middle of dating, become homeless. That's how precarious my finances were. So my time and my resources were really, really, really tight. And it was often exhausting to go on dates and just have to be on my toes and be focused on this guy and be taken away from my kids and also have to have babysitters and things like that. It was really tough. And there were a couple of men that I dated that were really conscious about that. I had a man who just said, "Hey, what are you already doing this week? I'd love to meet up with you, whatever that looks like." And I was doing like a Thursday night hike. And he said, "Hey, if that's okay with you, I'd love to just meet you on that Thursday night hike." And then he asked me what I was doing with my kids. This makes me want to cry. And I told him that I was going to have to find a babysitter. I had a babysitter upstairs that I could hire. And he said, "Do you mind if I pay for the babysitter for you? I'll sell you some money." And can you pay for an extra hour so that we have time to go get dessert afterward? Another guy that I dated, and he had backstage concert tickets to a lot of the country concerts because he did audio for musicians. And after our first date, he texted me and said, I feel bad leaving all of our kids behind. If you want to bring your kiddos the next time we go out, I can get backstage passes for everyone. Just let me know how many tickets you want. This man was only mid attractive. I actually didn't swipe on him. He saw me on one of my YouTubes and reached out to me and said, I'm just going to go for broke here and invite you to a concert. And he was just so genuine about everything that he said that I couldn't resist. And I saw as I was dating this huge difference between those value adders and the vampires. And it wasn't just about looks, although I'm going to be honest here, it is important to me to be attracted to my partner. I have type, Kevin is my type, and it wasn't about money. The guys that I was dating, they all had similar financial situations. It was about being seen, it was about an emotional connection, and more importantly, it was meeting me where I was at. And again, adding value to my life because I was happy single. I was loving just being alone, being able to stay up late at night, eating hummus and chips in bed, watching Jimmy Fallon with messy hair and no makeup, never worrying about what I looked like inside my own home, never having to think about what do I want for dinner that my husband will also like, but just making whatever I wanted for dinner. My single era, once I got used to being lonely after the shock of the divorce, was probably the happiest and most educational time of my life. And it's funny how, like, you know, how you can feel things just like in your body when you aren't even conscious of them? I started to feel when I was spending time with men that sense of peace and that happiness that I had when I was alone in my own space without them was sometimes disrupted. And I had stress and I was conscious of the way that I looked or the way that I walked or the way that I talked in ways that I simply didn't want to be. And then there was another group of men where I felt better when I was with them. So I need to clarify the fact that I was dating a ton. I didn't just like, I'm going to go on one date and now this is my guy. I had about 100 dates by the time I met Kev with different men. That was during the time of my separation from my husband and then after our divorce up until meeting Kevin. I decided that I wanted to see what different personalities felt like and what different men might be like in my space. And I'm really glad that I dated a lot because it taught me as much about dating and romance and relationships as it did about myself. Eventually, of course, I would meet Kev, who was one of my YouTube followers. We need to do a video about exactly how that all went down and how we met in real life. We've been together now for 6 years next month, which is absolutely wild. And the very first night that Kevin spent at my house, I went to take a shower, got out of the shower. Kev was in my bedroom folding like 2 weeks worth of laundry. He had every laundry hamper dumped out, and everything was like pristine, laid out, folded immaculately on my bed, and then cleaned up dog barf that I didn't even know the dog had barfed up, and then was going out in the kitchen to ask me what the kids would want for breakfast because we're trying to get to church. And the moment that Kevin came into my life, I can never talk about meeting Kevin without crying my eyes out. My regulars know that. My life would not be what it is today if it wasn't for Kevin. I wouldn't be alive today. He actually saved my life during COVID, and he changed everything. What exactly is it about Kevin that makes my life better with him than it was without? Boy, I'll tell you, if I could like patent that and put it in a bottle, I'd be rich. I've actually told Kevin that he needs to like start some masterclass of his own where he teaches men what they need to do to be amazing human beings because he has it down pat. Kevin is a good partner. He's not just a cool guy. He's not just a hot guy. He's not just a good guy or a rich guy. Kevin is an amazing partner. And I think that foundationally, a lot of the frustration in men's dating lives right now stems from the fact that through no fault of their own, we aren't raising boys to be good partners. I'm going to very loosely paraphrase Esther Perel here because I can't do a 5-hour video into some of her research. If you're not following Esther Perel, she is a primary relational researcher and also a clinical psychologist, and she dives into all the nitty-gritty about human attraction and desire, our romantic relationships. And some of her research is so important, not just societally, but for us as individuals. I'm a different person today because of Esther Perel and things that I've learned from her. Esther Perel talks about the difference between boys who are raised with a high level of emotional intelligence and boys who are not. So, for instance, if a son goes to football practice and he comes home and sits down at the dinner table with dad, dad may ask him about practice and he's going to go through the logistics of practice. Like, what happened? Oh, you got hurt. Well, I hope you got right back up again and finished up practice strong. How do you feel like you're going to do in the game next week? And there's not a lot of emotional intelligence that goes into the conversation. Whereas with a mom, the mom might ask about football practice and, oh, you fell down and got hurt. How did you feel about that? Like, were you embarrassed? Were you okay? Who came to help you? And that emotional connection, that emotional attunement then trains that boy to be more emotionally connected and attuned. Moms tend to ask how they felt and how they dealt. Dads ask if they won. Boys raised by moms and female role models do a little bit better in the relationship department, not because women are better at raising men, but because women are raised to be emotionally attuned to others. I was the oldest daughter in a big Mormon family, and I was raised to be constantly tuned into everybody else's needs. I would wake up on Saturday mornings before my mom and dad. My dad worked a swing shift, so he had crazy hours and slept in late on the weekends. And it was my job to listen for the baby to cry and to see who was hungry. And I learned from a very young age to turn on the Saturday morning cartoons and get out the teddy bears and the coloring books and try to keep my 4 brothers and sisters happy so that my mom and dad could sleep. And then I was also tuned into what my parents were doing. And from a very young age, I would whip out my childcraft books and I would try to cook some breakfast, often just simple scrambled eggs or French toast. And I became both an emotional and a physical caretaker to people around me from a very young age. All of you big sisters out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I became a big sister to my ex-husband. So my 19-year-old, 20-year-old self was extremely nurturing. I gave him that big sister treatment in the very beginning, and he let me give him that big sister treatment. And then he did what his big brother self did, and he treated me like crap. Which makes me think that we should always talk to the sisters before we marry these guys because they know. So a lot of the frustration is just stemming from the fact that women no longer literally need men. We have our own bank accounts, we have our own jobs, we have the capacity to buy our own homes and live life really great. There's almost nothing to be done around the house that I can't hire somebody to do. I don't physically need a man to take care of me anymore. And when we choose to date, it's because we want to date. We are looking to add value to our life. Now, for some of us, that does still mean financial value. We have a hard time keeping up with this economy. It'd be nice to have somebody help pay rent and other financial benefits. But for most of us, we are looking for a partner. We are looking for somebody who's going to emotionally connect with us, that we can have meaningful conversations with. There was a study done by Stan Tatkin where he talked about the phenomenon of sharing life experiences with other people. And he says, I believe this is from his book, Wired for Love, that if you're watching a sunset alone, yes, you have all these endorphins that light up. But if you're watching a sunset with somebody that you love and sharing that experience, you have even more parts of your brain light up for pleasure than if you were watching it alone. And that is what we women are looking for. We're looking for the guy that's going to light up our life. in ways that we can't do ourselves. And if we don't find that, then we don't need you. Fortunately, a lot of the men who are out there trying to date just weren't taught to be good partners. They were taught to take the tackle and stand back up and win the game. And that's it. You know how when you have physical limitations, then you will compensate for that by being really good in other areas. I had a blind friend in college, and he talked about how that his senses were so much stronger, like his sense of sound, his taste, even the way that he experienced like the level of a sidewalk so that he knew exactly what was going on in the world around him. He had to compensate for the fact that he didn't have sight. And I think that what men have done for a very long time is they have known that they have these emotional limitations through no fault of their own. Just societally, we have raised real men to be real men. And that is supposed to indicate a level of emotional detachment that parades as strength. And so what the men have done is they've hidden behind their money. They've been providers, I'm going to pay for your date and I'm going to pay for your house and I'm going to do all of this because I cannot meet you emotionally in ways that I know that women need to be met. And I think that that maybe worked for a couple generations of women, but that is no longer working now. And that is why so many men are frustrated because they want to cling to their old ways, especially some of the red hat boys. They're going to keep on being the real men and they're just going to complain that women don't swipe on them and women don't go to coffee with them and women don't go to bed with them. And it's our fault and we need to change, but we are not going to change. We are leaning into the male loneliness pandemic until you guys change. The thing is, there's an actual solution to the male loneliness epidemic, and that solution is for men to evolve. It is possible. I was raised very girly, and at age 44, my marriage collapsed, and I had to evolve and step into both the dad role for my kids and the provider role for myself and them. And I've learned skills that are considered masculine and held up the entire world for four little people and myself. So I believe that at any age, any man can lean into emotional attunement, nurturing, connection, and true partnership. I don't believe it's ever too late for anyone. And my biggest example of that is my ex husband. He was a certified douchebag abuser for 24 years. And through some education, some therapy, and I don't know, self reflection, he is a much better person and a much better partner and a much better dad today than he ever was. Part of that was leaving the Mormon church and getting real help and not just like giving it to Jesus and having faith in that. I do own that some of the burden does lie on us women as mothers. It is our job to make sure that we are raising the next generation of sons very differently. The buck stopped with me. I didn't just want to break cycles for my daughters, I wanted to break cycles for my sons. My two sons are the best partners that I've ever seen. My little Brody runs around primarily with a giant gang of girls, including his adorable girlfriend. And it's so sweet the way that he's tuned into my emotions because he has such a female centric group. Not that my son doesn't have any guy friends, there are guys in the group, but the boys have to rise up to the level of the emotional maturity of the girls in the group, which is amazing. One of the sweetest things is that they all say, I love you. Like, if they're ever on the phone to any of their moms or dads or anything, you'll hear every one of them, love your mom, love you, dad. And Brody does that to me too. It's like the sweetest thing in the world. If he talks to me for 30 seconds about, like, I left my basketball shoes at home, can you bring them to school? It's, I love you, mom. Have a great day. And in addition to running with the girl pack, Brody was raised almost exclusively by me. I was the married single mom for the first 5 years of his life. And then when he was about 5, my ex husband abandoned our family. Then I single mommed for a while. And now Brody has a very emotionally attuned and mature stepdad in Kev. So he's definitely breaking the cycles and he is the next generation of really good partners. He gives me hope. In conclusion, I don't know that we can solve the whole loneliness epidemic for men, for women, for everybody. That's a much more complex and nuanced issue. But I do think that we can solve the dating problems. And I don't think that it's women becoming more feminine again and going back to the ways of the 1950s and being more compliant and submissive and less feminist or anything like that. I think that it's men stepping up to the plate. Or do I think that men have to live alone forever or be passport bros if they want somebody in their lives? But men, you guys certainly have a lot to learn. And once you do, some of us who see benefit from having you in our lives will be here waiting for you. I am one of the most woke, extreme, liberal feminists on the face of the planet. And I have an incredibly satisfying relationship with a man. So that says it all. I'd love to hear from you guys, though. I'll be hanging out in the comments. Thanks for watching and have a great day.